Thanks for coming out. You guys are all from local high schools, which is cool. And middle schools too? Excellent, even better. I think I started some of these photographs when I was in middle school. They go from when I'm 13, 14, and 15. Not in particular chronological order, although that's 15, and that's 14, probably, and then that one in front, I was probably 13 when I did that. But I grew up in the Bay Area, and the Black Panthers were a very effective civil rights group that rose up. They started in 1967, founded by that guy in the middle there, Bobby Seale, and Huey Newton were the founders of it. And one of the things, they rose up in the community because of police violence, very typical to the Black Lives Matter issues, same sort of issues. But they also had a whole program of community service and development. They had breakfast programs for school kids, education programs, they did health clinics, they did sickle cell clinics. So they did a lot of positive community work, and that was part of their whole ideology, was you have to serve the community. And in addition to, they didn't do a lot of protests. They did like formal things like you see them with the signs and at the rallies, but they didn't do like marches and stuff. So Huey Newton was stopped by the police, a scuffle started, and the policeman got shot and killed during the scuffle, and he was charged with murder. So he went on trial. He was in jail for like 2 years. And some of these pictures, you see them, they're by the courthouse out front, because they always had their members out in front of the courthouse during the trial. My parents were activists, so I had become involved in that. My father was an amateur photographer, so I grew up with photography being a big part of my life. I think when I was 11, they gave me my first camera, and this is before the internet or anything, so whenever you want to see pictures from other places, you had to get magazines like Life magazine or Look magazine, which both are long gone. But my father gave me 40 years of Life magazines one day. He just gave me a big box of them. So I studied photography just by, I was young and I just would go through these magazines. And then I was mentored by some other professional photographers that let me sort of follow them around. And that's a real good way to learn, if you can get to know like a professional photographer and get them to let you hang around with them and watch what they do and kind of make, your own pictures and ask them, and, because they showed me a lot of things, and that's a real way to learn in the field. And another thing is, and this is really nice with digital, is take a lot of pictures. When we were shooting film, when that was the medium, and you have a 36 exposure roll of film, there used to be an expression, if you get one good picture out of 36, you're doing great, which means maybe you had 35 failures. And we used to say photography is often a process of failure, where you go through the failures and you accept it and you learn and you look at them, and then you get the good ones and you figure out what you did different or how you did something different. Because in every situation, you kind of want to photograph things in a different way, like try different angles, because you never know exactly what's going to be the best moment. So I used to go to the trial in Oakland at the Alameda County Courthouse, and they would have the rallies. And then another aspect of this body of work is in Berkeley, which is separate from the Panthers, but the students at the University of California, Berkeley, there were protests and riots and all of this stuff, which is those middle pictures where they've got the tear gas, and then the National Guard was on the campus. These were protests against the war in Vietnam and there was an empty lot that the community turned into a park that was owned by the university, and the university didn't want the park there, so they bulldozed it and fenced it off, and everyone got upset, and there was a riot. 2 people got killed by the police, and then the National Guard came in. It went on for weeks. It was, it was pretty, dangerous. I got shot at by the police twice during that, and tear gassed frequently. And Bobby Seale there, he was the chairman of the Panthers, and he always encouraged me to take photos and encouraged me to, they had a weekly newspaper called the Black Panther newspaper, which they first people to publish my work because I was taking pictures and I let them use them. So I used to take pictures for them, and they would call me when something was going to happen. He's still alive. At one point, he was on trial for something, and the trial got so out of hand, they gagged and chained him to his chair. It was a really dramatic moment in history where, the defendant is chained to the chair. And on that podium is this iconic poster of Huey Newton, which became very famous at the time, of him in the chair with the shotgun and the spear. That was a real iconic image. And then you have Kathleen Cleaver, who was one of the leaders of the party. And there you have Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture, he came from the national civil rights movement and got involved. And when Huey went to jail, the movement became so big. When I first was associated with him, there was 3 offices in San Francisco, Richmond, Oakland. And over the course of a year, 70 other offices blew up across the country. And I don't know if any people have seen the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. That's about the Chicago office, Fred Hampton and the Chicago office. And it's a very true story. It's told very well. So I used to visit Huey in jail, and that was the day he got out of jail. After 2 years in jail, his conviction was overturned. But, it was a very exciting time, and I was lucky enough to have access to these people, and they embraced me and mentored me, and, I sort of learned a lot about being politically aware and active, and in a positive way. And there are things like that going on now, like all the, last year or the year before with the BLM rallies. And if people are interested in this sort of work, it's like go to these rallies and make photographs, and find small papers, send them your pictures. When you're just starting out, it's good to share your work and learn from other photographers and just look at things. And since we don't have magazines really anymore, look at online publications to see like great photography. You just learn photography from looking at great photos. The New York Times is got a lot of photography, and so if you can get online there, I don't know exactly what their policy is for student subscriptions, but they try to be pretty open. But look at a lot of photography, and study the history of the civil rights movement. This, in my opinion, really turned around the civil rights movement in the 60s. It was, it became a very, very powerful organization. The government then really attacked the party, and they killed lots of its members, and it was really kind of violent. If you look at that one where the Free Huey sign, the guy second from the right, he was murdered in Los Angeles in a shootout that was instigated by government agents, like pitting 2 groups of people together by sending each side like threatening letters, but each side wasn't threatening the other one, but then they got into a beef. That's kind of the story of these photographs and the party. And what's funny is I took these pictures, I was 13 and 14. And then by the time I was 15, 16, I kind of went on in different directions, got a driver's license, et cetera, and moved on. And I lost track of the film. You know, I lost it. I didn't know where it was. And I said, well, I guess that's gone, because potentially the FBI could have stolen it from my parents' house, because we were under a lot of surveillance. It was not that was a feasible situation at the time. And then my mother passed away in 2017, and we sold her house. And when they cleaned out the house, they found 50 rolls or 40 rolls of film tucked in the back of a file cabinet. And I hadn't seen these pictures in 50 years till 2018, and it was really like startling to sort of have my teenage years come back to me in such a way, and the fact that it was such a historical kind of significant moment in the history of civil rights. And I also bring that up, save all your pictures. You never know if it's, certain things, if you're photographing things that seem newsworthy, keep track of that. I mean, for instance, I did a painting that they put in the newspaper, and then when a couple of years ago, I'm not thinking about it, and I get a call from Warner Brothers, and they're producing that movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, and they say, well, we saw this painting you made when you were a teenager, and we want to use it in the movie. I said, well, okay, and they paid me money, put it in the movie, and I get to tell people I'm in the movie because my painting is on the wall behind the star, so it takes the slightest thing for me to put my own credit in things. But so it's like, try to keep track of the work you do, because sometimes you don't know that decades later it'll have more meaning than maybe it did to you at the time. I mean, this work what was going on at this time was like no other time in history since then. It was the closest thing was 2020 after George Floyd. That was a similar kind of historical moment. But one of the differences is at this time it was kind of focused around one organization, the Black Panthers, that had a whole program, a 10-point platform, what they wanted, and what they wanted for the community. But the George Floyd movement was very similar, that it went global very fast. And that's pretty much the story of these things. Does anyone have any questions? Yes? Pardon me?
Did you ever get to meet Kathleen?
Yes, I met Kathleen many times. I met her many times. Her husband, Eldridge, I was kind of his sidekick. So I would ride around in his car because he was the editor of the newspaper, and so he would take me places to take pictures. And then the newspaper, we would lay it out at their house. So I was around them a lot. Any other questions, thoughts?
I think it's interesting that you started so young, because now we don't really think of, there was a period of time when we didn't think of like kids being like photographers or like teenagers being photographers, and now because everybody has access to, or predominantly have access to technology, they can, similarly to you, do it.
Yeah, the access is easy. That's another thing, that with digital, you don't have to have a dark room, you don't have to, pay for film and get processing, which I would encourage that if you have the opportunity, because it's fun. Working in the dark room and shooting film is fun, and you can learn a lot from it. But what really makes becoming a great photographer is taking a lot of pictures. Because, the more pictures you make, one photographer once told me, he said, I was in LA and I used to do album covers for a living, and I was only taking pictures when someone would give me an assignment, and this famous photographer I met, he said, well, all these photographers are waiting for someone to tell them what to take a picture of, and they never take enough pictures to realize their own potential. And so then at that point I started photographing just every day. And even if, say, your goal is not to be a street photographer, photographing every day on the street is a great exercise. It's like practicing the guitar, because you're looking at light, you're looking at things, you're seeing how things look when they're photographed. A very close friend of mine, a famous photographer, his name is Gary Winogrand. They said, why do you take photographs? He said, because I like how things look photographed. And, it is, just how you design things within the frame, within those borders, where you fix your focus. And as you try things out, you learn. When you look through your film, go, okay, I focused, on the person's eyes at, a wide aperture, f2, and the background's out of focus. Then I did the same picture with the aperture down, and you just look at kind of the differences in how you made the photographs and sort of pick what you like. And take pictures of your friends, your family, events. And like I say, with digital, it's great. You can just, and if you know somebody that's got a job in a copy machine, you can just make 1 million prints. But inkjet's a little.
You do still have to back up those digital files in the end, though.
You do have to back up the digital files and figure out what to do with all those hard drives as the years go on. I got a stack of them about that high. But it's a great art form, and it's an art form that you can do on your own, where you have the means. You don't have to, rent something, go somewhere. Taking classes is good, but you can also just do it yourself. You make the photographs, you look at them. If they don't come out how you like, change how you're doing it, or look, up online, or talk to a photo teacher and say, what am I doing wrong here? And then go back out. And this, as I say, since it's digital, it's not going to cost you. So it's a great expression, and it's a great artistic outlet to be creative. And there's all kinds of, things that you can do as a photographer. Take pictures of concerts, musicians, fashion. If you have other interests besides, politics, everything gets photographed. And whatever your interest is, you can pursue that with photography. So, I encourage it as a pastime. I've done it my whole life, and I've, never regretted a minute of it. And I've, met some incredible people and photographed, what's the cliche? Captains of industry and world famous movie stars, but it's a lot of fun. It's a great career. And if you're thinking of making a career, you gotta, it's a hard road, it's very competitive, and if you got to really love what you're doing, your own pictures. But if you can go the long run, it's great. Any other questions? Yes.
When you found these photos again after years, when you look back at them, were there things that you would have done differently because you were so young? Or?
She asked, when I found these photos and look back them decades later, did I find things I would have done differently? No. I mean, there are frames where I will say, well, I wish I'd tilted down, tilted up, but that's still the case. It's been a really kind of strange experience being catapulted back to when I was 14 years old, so vividly through pictures. But, and there's, like, we have a book coming out, which there's that QR code, you can see a write-up about the book. And there's probably, 85 pictures from this work that I hadn't seen in the book. It'll come out in September. But sort of looking at how my work developed from the 13 to 15. And I was being mentored by professional photographers, and I could see it becoming tighter and tighter and better composed and more methodical. But,
There was one more question here. You had
How did you become associated with them?
Pardon me?
How did you become associated with the Black Panthers?
She asked, how did I become associated with the Black Panthers? My parents were activists, and we used to go to a lot of civil rights events and picket lines and protests. And I grew up in a house where we would have benefits for political causes, and there was a big event. There's an organization called SNCC, which is Southern Christian Leadership. The acronym, I'm not that clear on it. Southern Christian Leadership Conference or something. Anyway, the leader of it was this guy here, Stokely Carmichael, and he stepped down, and he turned it over to a guy named H. Rap Brown, who became quite famous because in 1967, he coined the phrase "burn, baby, burn," because there was a lot of riots all over the country. But when he turned it over to him, they had a big party at our house, and the ceremony and the celebration at that event. And some of the Panther leadership was there, so when I started hanging out, they kind of knew who I was through my parents. And so they brought me in. Did you have a
I was
question?
going to ask, were you out shooting for the Black Lives Matter movements? And
Uh,
was there anything you saw similar?
No, I didn't go out and shoot at all. That was pandemic. That was the thick of the pandemic. And I was working full time, and I'm head of household and head of a business, and I had a little bit of COVID nervousness. And I'm also, that's young people. It's a lot of energy.
Torch gets passed on at some point.
The torch gets passed on. But I edited a lot of the work because I'm an editor at the New York Times.
Okay.
So I did go through a lot of the work.
All right, we're
Yeah.
done.
So, folks, we have to wrap up. You're going to move on to the next exhibit. But thank you so much.
Well, thanks for
Jeffrey.
coming out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Make lots of photos.
Yes,